"I can heal your eyes," the little girl told the millionaire. His wife's secret was exposed. The city's Centennial Park was vibrant that Tuesday afternoon. The sun filtered through the leaves of the towering fig trees, creating patterns of light and shadow on the freshly mown lawn. But for Julian O'Connell, all of this was nothing more than a distant memory, a mental photograph that was fading day by day. He sat on a varnished timber bench with the rigid posture of someone educated in Europe's best schools. Julian adjusted the knot of his silk tie. His bespoke navy suit, made by a top Italian tailor, fitted his athletic body perfectly, and his dark glasses concealed the tragedy that had rewritten his destiny just 6 months ago. An absolute, cold, and permanent darkness. At 32, Julian, theoretically, had it all. An incalculable fortune inherited from his father's property development empire, homes on 3 continents, and a wife the society magazines described as the perfect partner. Yet, sitting there with his white cane leaning against his knee, he felt like the poorest man in the world. The sound of the birds brought him no peace, only irritation. The laughter of children playing in the distance reminded him of the family he didn't have. "Julian, please, stop fidgeting." Serafina's voice cut through his thoughts like a sharp knife. She stood a few meters away, furiously tapping on her mobile phone. Her red skirt suit was a declaration of power, and her blonde hair was styled in a perfect wave that even the breeze dared not disturb. "I have a board meeting in 40 minutes. I told you bringing you out for fresh air was a waste of time. You should be home with the nurse." "I just wanted to feel the sun on my face, Serafina," Julian replied, his voice deep and weary. "I haven't left that mansion in weeks. I feel like a prisoner in my own home. Don't be so dramatic. I'm doing this for your own good. In your condition, you're vulnerable. People look at you with pity. Don't you realize?" Serafina sighed in annoyance, still focused on her phone screen. "Wait here for me. I'm going to buy a bottle of mineral water. I can't stand this heat. And don't speak to anyone." The click-clack of Serafina's stiletto heels, retreating along the stone path, echoed in Julian's sharp ears until they disappeared. He was left alone, enveloped in his darkness, clenching his fists on his knees. The loneliness was heavier than the blindness. It was then that he sensed something unusual. It wasn't a noise, but a presence. Someone had stopped right in front of him. The air shifted slightly, bringing with it a scent that didn't fit the park's manicured environment. It wasn't Serafina's French perfume, nor the smell of cut grass. It was the smell of burning gum leaves, old clothes, and dampness, but it also had a sweet undertone, like stale pumpkin scones. Julian tensed his muscles. "Who's there?" he asked, turning his head slightly, trying to use his hearing like radar. No one answered immediately, but then he felt a touch. It was a small, tiny hand, rough with skin weathered by the cold and neglect, placed with infinite gentleness upon his forehead. The contact was electric. Julian, who usually recoiled from physical touch since his accident, froze. He felt no fear, but a strange calm that descended down his spine, silencing the distant traffic noise. "I can heal your eyes," a cracked but firm child's voice whispered. Julian swallowed, bewildered. The girl's hand remained on his forehead, radiating a warmth that seemed to penetrate to the back of his empty sockets. What are you doing?" he murmured, not daring to pull away. "Your eyes aren't dead, mister," the girl continued. Her voice held a seriousness that belied her age. "They're just sad, very sad. Nan says sadness puts out the light, but if you take out the sadness, the light comes back. I can take it out." In front of him, though Julian couldn't see her, stood Posy. She was 8 years old, but her large, dark eyes seemed to have seen 100 years of hardship. She wore an enormous gray hoodie, 3 sizes too big for her malnourished body, covered in badly stitched patches and dirt stains. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her threadbare thongs had holes where her toes peeked out. Yet, her posture was dignified, almost solemn. As she kept her hand on the millionaire's forehead, Julian felt a knot form in his throat. No one had touched him with such compassion in years, not even his wife, Serafina, who touched him with clinical efficiency or impatience, but never like this. "What's your name?" Julian asked, feeling a treacherous tear gather beneath his dark glasses. "Just Posy," she replied, gently removing her hand. "But my name doesn't matter. What matters is that you need to see again. There are things you aren't seeing, and it's not the fault of your eyes." Julian was about to ask what she meant when the unmistakable, aggressive sound of Serafina's heels returned, this time pounding the pavement in a fury. Serafina stopped dead about 10 meters away. The bottle of water she was carrying slipped from her fingers and fell to the ground, rolling along the path. Her face, usually composed and cold, contorted into a mask of absolute terror. Her blue eyes fixed on the ragged girl standing in front of her husband. It couldn't be. She had made sure they were far away. She had made sure they disappeared. The girl turned her head and looked at Serafina. There was no fear in the little girl's gaze, only a silent, accusing recognition. "You!" Serafina screamed, recovering her voice, which now sounded shrill and panic-stricken. "Get away from him right now!" Serafina's cries shattered the magical atmosphere created around the bench. Julian flinched, disoriented by the violence in his wife's voice. He instinctively reached out a hand, searching for the girl's location, fearing Serafina might hurt her. "Serafina, wait," Julian ordered, getting up with difficulty, using his cane for stability. "She's just a child. She's not doing anything wrong." But Serafina wasn't listening. Fear had transformed her. She ran the few meters separating them, as if her life depended on it. She reached Pazzi and pushed her forcefully by the shoulder. The girl, weak and small, stumbled and fell onto the grass, though she didn't make a sound of complaint. "I don't want you near him. I warned you," Serafina bellowed, completely losing the elegant composure she so carefully maintained in public. She turned to Julian, grabbing his arm with a painful grip. "Julian, let's go. She's a thief. These people in the park are pickpockets. They use kids to distract you and steal your watch." "She wasn't stealing anything," Julian said, abruptly pulling away from his wife's grasp. His face was red with anger. He hated being treated like a useless person who couldn't perceive reality. "She was talking to me. She touched my forehead. She said she could heal me." Serafina went pale. She looked at the girl, who was getting up from the ground, shaking the dirt off her gray hoodie. "Heal you?" Serafina let out a nervous, sharp, and unpleasant laugh. "For God's sake, Julian, she's a filthy beggar with delusions. She's probably high or crazy. Look at her. Well, you can't see her, but she's repulsive. She smells like rubbish. I smell like gum leaves," Posey said. Her voice didn't tremble despite the fall. She stood firm, looking the woman in red in the eyes. "And you smell like fear." The sentence struck Serafina like a physical slap. She took a step back, clutching her chest. "What did you say, you insolent brat?" Serafina hissed. Julian, guided by the girl's voice, took a step towards her. "Why did you say that, little one?" Julian asked, ignoring his wife. "Why do you say she's scared?" Posey approached Julian again, ignoring Serafina's murderous gaze. "Because she knows who I am, and she knows the lie ends when you reach the old Millionaire's table," the girl said with devastating clarity. Julian's heart began to pound hard against his ribs. A sense of déjà vu washed over him. Millionaire's table. That phrase triggered a fragmented memory in his brain. Something from his childhood, something before the Swiss boarding schools and the life of luxury. A rustic wooden table in a small kitchen where someone served him warm pumpkin soup. "Stop it," Serafina interrupted, frantic with desperation. She opened her designer handbag, pulled out a handful of high-denomination bills, $50s and $100s, without even counting them, and threw them in the girl's face. The bills fluttered in the air before falling onto the grass and around Posey's broken thongs. "Take it! There's enough money for you to eat for a month. Now get lost and never come near us again." The park went silent for an instant. Some passers-by stopped to watch the scene. The elegant woman, humiliating a street child in front of a blind man. Posey didn't move. She didn't bend down to pick up a single bill. She kept her gaze fixed on Julian's face, covered by the dark glasses. "Money doesn't heal eyes, mister," the girl said softly. "And it doesn't buy forgiveness either. Nan Mavis is waiting. She didn't want the money this woman offered her 5 years ago to go away, and I don't want it now either." Hearing the name Mavis, Julian felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He dropped his cane, which hit the ground with a dry thud. His hands began to tremble uncontrollably. "Mavis." Julian's voice cracked, turning into a hoarse whisper. "My mother." He turned toward where he sensed Serafina's presence, his face contorted by a mixture of hope and horror. "Serafina, you told me my mother died 3 years ago. You showed me the death certificate. You took me to her grave." Serafina was cornered. Cold sweat ran down her back. She looked around for an escape, an excuse, anything. "She's lying, Julian," Serafina screamed, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's a common scam. They research the names of your dead relatives to get money out of you. It's cruel what they're doing. Let's go, please. The car is waiting." Serafina tried to grab Julian again, pulling his sleeve with desperation. But this time Julian wasn't a sick man. He was a man who had just woken up. Julian planted his feet on the ground. With a quick movement, he extended his hand toward the girl's voice. "Girl." "Posy," Julian said, his hand suspended in the air. "Give me your hand." "Don't touch her, Julian. She'll give you some disease," Serafina shrieked, but Posy, with a sad smile, extended her small, dirty hand and took the millionaire's large, manicured hand. Feeling that contact again, that rough, warm skin, Julian knew the truth. It wasn't a logical deduction, it was a visceral instinct. The girl's hand had the same bone structure as his own. Her fingers fit. This girl was not a stranger. This girl was his blood. "Take me," Julian commanded, gripping the girl's hand, as if it were his only anchor in the world. "Take me to Mavis. Now. If you take one step with her, I'll leave you," Serafina threatened, playing her last card. The abandonment card that always worked with him. "You'll be left alone, blind, with no one to care for you." Julian turned his head toward Serafina. Though he couldn't see her, Serafina felt he was looking directly into her soul. And what she saw there chilled her to the bone. "I'd rather be blind and alone than accompanied by a liar," Julian said in a glacial voice. "And if my mother is alive, Serafina, get ready, because God won't forgive you for what I'm going to do." Julian stepped forward, guided by the girl in the gray hoodie, leaving behind his wife, his chauffeur, and the life of lies he had built. The sound of the banknotes being trodden on by his shoes as he walked away was the only farewell Serafina received. The sound of the park birds was left behind, quickly replaced by the aggressive roar of the main avenue. For Julian, the world had become a cacophony of horns, screeching brakes, and the murmuring of hurried people. But in the middle of that chaos, the only thing that gave meaning to his reality was Posy's small, rough hand clinging to his. She didn't pull him with impatience, but guided him with protective firmness, skillfully dodging cracks in the footpath, and distracted pedestrians with a street savvy that no finishing school could teach. "Julian, stop right now." Serafina's voice pursued them, mixed with the frantic clacking of her heels on the asphalt. "You're making a fool of yourself. People are looking at us. For God's sake, you're an O'Connell. You can't walk off hand in hand with a bogan." Julian clenched his jaw but didn't stop. The darkness surrounding him no longer felt empty. It felt full of questions that demanded immediate answers. Every step he took away from his wife was a step toward a truth he feared, but needed more than air. "Where are we going, little one?" Julian asked, ignoring his wife's shouts. His voice sounded hoarse, laden with contained emotion. "To the bus stop, mister," Posy replied naturally, as if taking a blind millionaire in a navy silk suit onto public transport was the most normal thing in the world. "The 42 will drop us near the Ridge settlement, but we have to walk fast because if we miss this one, the next one takes an hour." A bus. Serafina's scream was strident when she finally managed to catch up, grabbing Julian's free arm and pulling him hard to stop him. "You are not getting on a germ-infested bus. Julian, listen to me. You're having an episode. It's post-traumatic stress from the accident. The doctor said this could happen. This girl is not your niece, your granddaughter, or anything. She's a trained con artist. Her mother is probably dictating what she has to say through an earpiece." Julian stopped dead, forcing Posy to stop too. The millionaire turned his face towards where he smelled his wife's expensive perfume, a fragrance that he once found elegant and now turned his stomach. "Serafina," Julian said, lowering his voice to a dangerously calm tone. "You said my mother died of a heart attack 3 years ago. You said you went to the hospital, that they gave you her ashes, that she didn't want to see me because she was ashamed of her poverty. And it's true." Serafina lied, though her voice trembled imperceptibly. "I did it to protect you. She hated you, Julian. She hated you for being successful. She wanted your money for her vices." Posy tightened her grip on Julian's hand. The girl looked up at the elegant blonde woman, who stared at them with desperation and hatred. "Nan doesn't have vices," the girl said clearly. "She only drinks chamomile tea." And she wrote letters to Mr. Julian every week, letters on blue paper. The air seemed to freeze around Julian. "Blue paper," he repeated, feeling a shiver. His mother always used cheap blue paper to write to him when he was at boarding school more than 20 years ago. It was an intimate detail no one else knew. "Yes," Posy continued without letting go of the man's hand, but they never reached him. The woman in red intercepted them in the big mailbox at the entrance. "I saw her once when I went to secretly drop one off, and I saw her burn them in the white stone fireplace in the big lounge room. Nan cried a lot when she found out you never replied. She thought you'd forgotten her because you were rich." Julian felt his legs fail him. The mental image was devastating. His mother, elderly and humble, writing with hope on blue paper, and Serafina, the woman he slept with every night, throwing those words of love into the fire, laughing at his pain, manipulating his loneliness to keep him isolated and controlled. "She's lying," Serafina shrieked hysterically, looking at the onlookers who were starting to stop to observe the scene. "She's a pathological liar. I'll call the police." "She's taking a disabled person against his will." "No, Serafina," Julian interrupted. He pulled abruptly out of his wife's grasp and raised his white cane, pointing it at her like an accusing sword. "No one is taking me against my will. I choose to go, and if you dare to follow us or call anyone, I swear on my father's memory that tomorrow I will instruct my lawyers to strip you of everything, even the surname." Serafina backed away, pale as paper. The financial threat was the only thing that truly terrified her. "Julian, you can't be serious. You can't go off with that tramp to a dumpy suburb. They'll rob you, they'll kill you. You can't see anything." Her voice cracked, oscillating between fury and feigned crying. "I'm doing this because I love you." "If you loved me, you would have loved what I love," Julian stated. Then he softened his grip on the girl's hand. "Posy, take me to the bus. I want to go home, to my real home." The girl nodded, though he couldn't see her, and pulled him gently. "Come on, Uncle Julian, the green bus is coming." They left Serafina standing on the footpath, gasping like a fish out of water, her nails dug into her designer handbag, watching her life of luxury and lies begin to crumble because of an 8-year-old girl who smelled of gum leaves. The bus ride was an overwhelming sensory experience for Julian. Accustomed to the hermetic silence of his air-conditioned limo, he was plunged into a world of mechanical noises, smells of sweat, fried food, and diesel fuel. Stepping up, he stumbled on the steps, but Posy was instantly there, placing her small hand on his back to gently push him. "Lift your foot, mister. It's a high step," she instructed him. No one offered him the reserved seat. Julian could feel the heavy stares of the passengers. They weren't looks of admiration for his expensive suit. They were looks of judgment. A rich bloke playing poor, or perhaps a rich bloke who's hit rock bottom, he heard murmurs. "Look at that bloke's shoes. They're worth more than my house," someone whispered. "What's he doing with Mad Mavis's kid?" another voice replied. That comment was the one that confirmed everything. Mad Mavis. That's what they called his mother. Julian felt a pang of pain in his chest, but also relief. If people knew her, it meant she was real, that she was alive. They sat at the back. The bus started with a violent jerk that almost made Julian fall, but he clung to the rusty metal pole. "Is it far?" he asked in a low voice, leaning toward the girl. "A bit. We have to cross the bridge and climb the ridge," Posy explained. Then, with sudden shyness, she added, "Are you really my uncle? Nan says you're her son, but you left a long time ago and became a king." Julian smiled sadly. "I'm not a king, little one. I'm just a man who was blind long before he lost his sight." He paused, searching for the words. "How is she? How is my mother? Tell me the truth, please." Posy fiddled with the patches on her hoodie before answering. "Nan is tired. Her bones hurt when it rains, and she coughs a lot from the cold. The house has holes in the roof, and the water comes in." The girl lowered her voice. Sometimes she doesn't eat to give it to me. She says she's not hungry, but I know it's a lie. Her stomach makes noises." Every word was a dagger in Julian's heart. While he was dining on lobster and drinking vintage wines in his climate-controlled mansion, his own mother was going hungry and cold a few kilometers away. The guilt hit him with such force that he had to remove his dark glasses to wipe away the tears that flowed uncontrollably from his useless eyes. "Never again," Julian swore, clenching his teeth. "She will never go hungry again, I promise you." The bus braked with a metallic screech. "Minutes now." "We're here," Posy announced. Getting off, the change of atmosphere was drastic. The air no longer smelled of city pollution, but of damp earth, burnt rubbish, and home-cooked stews. The ground beneath Julian's Italian loafers was uneven, full of stones and potholes. "Be careful, no footpath here," the girl warned, gripping his hand tighter. "We have to walk along the edge of the dirt road." They started walking. Julian felt clumsy, vulnerable. His cane hit empty cans and stones. He heard the barking of stray dogs very close to his legs. He realized how far he was from his comfort zone. This was a place where the money in his pocket didn't serve as a shield against reality. Suddenly, a powerful engine roared behind them, approaching dangerously and kicking up a cloud of dust. The vehicle braked sharply, blocking their path. Julian recognized the engine sound. It was the security Land Cruiser that usually followed him. "Mr. O'Connell," said the voice of Daza, his head of security, a burly, loyal man, but loyal to whoever paid. and Serafina had been signing the checklist lately. Mrs. Serafina is very worried. She ordered us to take you home immediately by force, if necessary. Julian felt Posey shrink with fear beside him, trying to hide behind his leg. Daza, Julian said, standing as tall as he was. Despite his blindness and his dusty clothes, he radiated natural authority. You've worked for my family for 10 years. You knew my father, didn't you? You know who I am. Yes, sir, but the missus says you're not in your right mind, that this girl has drugged you or hypnotized you. The passenger door opened, and Serafina's voice, who had come with the security team, was heard. She didn't dare get out of the car, afraid of muddying her shoes in the dirt of the outer suburb. Get him in the car, Daza, she screamed from the window. The game's over, Julian. Get in right now, or I'll have you declared mentally incompetent and take full control of the company first thing tomorrow. That was the last straw. Serafina had just revealed her true face completely. She was no longer the worried wife. She was the ambitious partner who saw her most valuable asset in danger. Julian let go of Posey's hand for a second and walked towards the sound of Daza's voice. Daza, listen to me closely, Julian said in a voice of steel. If you touch me or the girl, you are fired. And not only that, I will make sure you never work in security in this country again. But if you let me pass, if you get back in that car and take that woman away from here, I will triple your salary when I regain control of my accounts tomorrow, because I am going to regain it. There was a tense silence. Only the idling engine of the Land Cruiser and the wind rattling the nearby Calamine roofs could be heard. Mr. Daza hesitated. Don't listen to him, Serafina shrieked. He's a useless blind man. Obey me, Daza, Julian insisted, softer this time. My mother lives right up here. I'm going to see her. Are you going to stop me from seeing my mother? Daza sighed loudly. The sound of a door closing indicated his decision. Sorry, Mrs. Serafina. I don't get involved with anyone's mother, the guard said firmly. What are you doing? Serafina screamed as the car began to reverse. You're all traitors. Julian, you'll regret this. You'll rot in this rubbish dump. I prefer this rubbish dump to your ice palace, Serafina, Julian murmured, as the sound of the vehicle faded, taking with it the last connection to his previous life. He turned to the girl, feeling the air until he found her shoulder. They're gone, Posey, they're gone. The girl, who had been holding her breath, let out a sob of relief and hugged Julian's leg. You're brave, uncle, like the knights in the stories Nan reads me. No, I'm not brave, Julian denied, stroking the girl's messy hair. I just had my eyes closed, and you're opening them for me. Now, take me. I want to smell my mother's soup. They continued the climb up the dirt path. The sun was beginning to set, and the air was getting colder. But Julian felt an inner warmth that grew with every step. He was heading into the unknown, towards poverty, towards the pain of the past, but for the first time in years, he knew exactly where he was going. The ascent up the ridge was a physical ordeal Julian could never have imagined in his previous life, protected by tinted glass and air conditioning. Each step was a battle against gravity and his own blindness. The dirt road, hardened by the sun and cracked by the lack of rain, was a map of invisible dangers for him. His leather-soled shoes slipped constantly on the loose gravel, and more than once his ankles painfully twisted, threatening to break. Careful here, uncle. There's a ditch where the runoff water flows, Posey warned, pulling his hand hard to guide him to the left. Julian obeyed, but his right foot slipped on the muddy edge. He lost his balance and fell heavily onto his knees. The impact was dry and painful. He felt the fine fabric of his Italian trousers tear and the stones dig into his skin, breaking the epidermis. The pain was sharp, but the sting of humiliation was worse. There he was, Julian O'Connell, the magnate, kneeling in the mud of an outer suburb, blind and dirty. Uncle, are you okay? Posse's voice sounded alarmed. He felt her little hands trying to lift him, but he was too heavy for her. Julian stayed there for a moment, breathing heavily. The smell of the place was intense, a mixture of damp earth, gum leaf smoke, farm animals, and something else, something that smelled of raw, unfiltered humanity. I'm fine, he lied, clenching his teeth not to cry out in frustration. He tried to get up, but his hand, seeking support, touched something viscous and cold on the ground. He frantically wiped it on his jacket, ruining it further. Let me help you, the girl insisted. No, he barked, driven by an old stupid pride. I can do it myself. He stood up, staggering, dirty, and panting. There was an uncomfortable silence. Julian realized his mistake instantly. He couldn't treat his only guide the way he treated his employees. I'm sorry, he whispered, lowering his head. I'm not used to this. I'm not used to not being able to see where I step." "Don't worry," Pazzi said with a maturity that broke his heart. "Mum used to fall a lot too when she got sick. She said the ground was calling her because she was tired." Julian tensed. "Your mum?" he asked, as they resumed walking more slowly. "My sister, Sophie." "Yes, Sophie." The girl pronounced the name with reverence. "She told me about you. She said you had coffee-colored hair and liked to read big books. Where is she now?" "Posey?" Julian feared the answer, but he needed to know how much damage his absence and Serafina's manipulation had caused. Posey was silent for a few seconds. Only the distant barking of a dog and the crunch of their footsteps could be heard. "She went to heaven 2 winters ago," the girl said softly. "She had a bad cough. Nan Mavis says she ran out of strength, but I think she ran out of hope. She was waiting for a letter from you, Uncle. Every day she'd ask the postman if anything had arrived from Mr. Julian. When she died, Nan stopped asking. Julian stopped dead. The air left his lungs as if he had been punched in the stomach. 2 winters. 2 years ago, just when he was closing a multi-million-dollar deal in Tokyo, celebrating with champagne, his sister was dying in poverty, waiting for a word from him, help that never came, because his wife intercepted the mail. The guilt was not a weight, it was an acid running through his veins. I didn't know." His voice cracked. Tears streamed again, mixing with the sweat and dirt on his face. "I swear on my life I didn't know. Serafina told me Sophie had married a foreigner and was living happily in Europe. She told me they didn't want anything to do with me." "Lies have short legs, Uncle." "None always says that," Posey replied, squeezing his hand. "But you're here now. That's what matters. Come on, we're almost there. It's the house with the blue door. Well, most of the paint has fallen off, but a little bit is still blue." They continued climbing. As they advanced, the city noise faded, replaced by more domestic sounds. A radio playing an old ballad, a baby crying, the sound of someone chopping wood. Suddenly, an aroma hit Julian. It was so potent that it stopped him dead again. But this time not from pain, but from a visceral memory that emerged from the depths of his childhood memory. It was the smell of toast and garlic, the smell of pumpkin soup. That smell instantly transported him 30 years back to a small but warm kitchen where there were no luxuries, but a hug was never missing. He remembered his mother singing as she cooked, long before his father's fortune changed them, long before the money built walls between them. It smells like he began to say, "Dinner." Posey completed. "Nan's cooking. It's our lucky day. We got stale bread from the bakery down the road, and she works miracles with that." They reached a structure. Julian couldn't see it, but he could sense the precariousness. The ground changed from dirt to uneven cement. He heard the sound of a loose, corrugated iron sheet rattling against the roof in the wind. The house breathed fragility. "It's here," Posey whispered. She let go of Julian's hand and ran a few steps. "Nan, open up, it's me. I've brought you a surprise." Julian stood on the threshold, trembling. He felt like an intruder, a ghost from the past coming to disturb the peace of the living. He adjusted his torn jacket, ran his hand through his dirty hair, trying to regain a little dignity. But what good was dignity against the naked truth of the poverty he had allowed? He heard slow, dragging footsteps approaching from inside, the sound of a rusty metal bolt sliding, and then the creak of hinges that hadn't seen oil in years. The door opened. The inside of the house smelled of old dampness, old wood, and that comforting and painful aroma of boiling soup. For Julian, entering there was like entering a forgotten sanctuary. The light from outside filtered through the cracks in the wooden walls, but for him, everything was shadow. However, his heightened hearing caught every detail. The rhythmic drip of a leak in a corner, the buzz of a solitary fly, and the heavy, wheezing breath of an elderly woman in front of him. Posey. Mavis's voice was a thread of sound, worn out by years and suffering. It didn't have the strength Julian remembered from his childhood. It was the voice of someone fading away. "Why did you take so long, dear? I was worried. Who is that man?" Julian removed his dark glasses. His eyes, though useless for seeing, were filled with an expression of desperate pleading. He looked toward where the voice came from, meeting the darkness but projecting the image of the woman who gave him life into his mind. "Mum." The word left his throat like a painful, cutting fragment of glass. There was a loud metallic noise, a spoon falling to the floor. Then absolute silence. In the gloom of the room, Mavis had frozen. She was standing next to an old Laminex table, a robust, scarred wooden board. The same table where she had kneaded bread for decades. The same table where she had cried over the death of her daughter, Sophie, and where she had written hundreds of letters that never reached their destination. Her hands, deformed by arthritis and hard work, trembled violently on the rough surface. Her eyes, clouded by incipient cataracts, scrutinized the figure of the man at the door. The expensive suit, though dirty, the posture, the profile, it was impossible. Her mind often played tricks on her, making her see her son in strangers on the street. But this feels different, doesn't it? Mavis murmured, stepping back, leaning heavily on the table not to fall. It can't be. My son is dead, she told me. The blonde woman came and told me he no longer existed for us, that I was dead to him. Lise! Julian shouted, taking a hesitant step inside, tripping over a straw chair. It was all lies, Mum. I never forgot you. She told me you had died. She took me to a fake grave. Mavis put a hand over her mouth, stifling a sob. Disbelief struggled with maternal instinct. That cry, that desperation, that was the cry of her Julian. Not the cold businessman he saw in the old magazines she collected from the rubbish, but her boy, the one who scraped his knees and came crying for comfort. Julian? She asked again with a heartbreaking tone of hope. Is it really you? You're not a dream in my old head? It's me, Mum. It's me. Julian moved forward, guided by the sound of her breathing. He extended his arms, hitting the edge of the old table. I'm here. I'm blind, Mum, but I'm here. Hearing the word blind, Mavis's barrier of fear broke. She no longer saw the distant millionaire. She saw her wounded son. She moved with a speed her tired legs shouldn't have allowed. She rounded the table and launched herself toward him. The impact of the hug was tectonic. Mavis enveloped her son with her thin but strong arms, burying her face in his mud-stained chest. Julian collapsed, falling to his knees, dragging his mother with him, hugging her around the waist, clinging to the worn fabric of her dress as if it were the only life raft in a shipwreck. Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me, Julian repeated over and over, crying like a child, his tears wetting his mother's shoulder. I was an idiot. I should have come myself. I should have looked for you. I let myself be blinded by money before I lost my eyes. Mavis stroked her son's head, her fingers tangling in his brown hair, just as she did when he was 5 years old. She also cried, but her tears were tears of relief that washed away years of bitterness. Shh, my boy. It's over. Her voice, though weak, regained that maternal tone that cures everything. It wasn't your fault. Evil is cunning and dresses in silk, son. That woman has a black soul, but God is greater. God brought you back to my table. Posey watched the scene from the door, her eyes shining. She closed the door softly to shut out the outside world. She approached and placed her hand on Julian's shoulder, completing the circle. Julian lifted his face, searching for his mother's hands, took them in his, and kissed them. He felt the rough skin, the calluses, the bone deformities. Every scar on his mother's hands was a story of sacrifice that he hadn't honored. Your hands. Julian sobbed. You worked so hard, and I lived like a king. My hands are fine, son, Mavis said, smiling through her tears, wiping Julian's dirty face with her thumb. They serve to hold you. That's the only thing that matters now. But tell me, what happened to your eyes? Why do you say you can't see? A car accident 6 months ago. The doctors say the nerve is damaged, that there's nothing to be done, Julian explained, feeling the weight of his disability again. Serafina, she took advantage of that. She isolated me. She made me believe I was alone in the world to keep everything. That woman. Mavis's expression hardened. A shadow of fury crossed her kind face. She came here, Julian. When Sophie died, she came in her big car. She didn't get out. She rolled down the window and threw an envelope of money at us for the funeral. She said, Julian sent this so you can bury her and stop bothering him. He's not coming. He has an important life, and you lot are rubbish. I burned that money, son. We buried your sister with what the neighbors and I collected. But I never believed you were bad. I just believed you were lost. Julian felt a wave of anger so intense it almost made him dizzy. Serafina's cruelty had no limits. Not only had she stolen his family, she had tried to buy his mother's dignity with the crumbs of his fortune. I swear, Mum, Julian said, standing up and helping Mavis up. She will pay for every tear you shed. But now I'm hungry. Mavis let out a wet laugh, surprised by the sudden change. Hungry? But son, there's only pumpkin soup and stale bread here. It's not rich man's food. It's exactly what I want, Julian said firmly. I don't want caviar or truffles or anything paid for with the money she separated. I want to sit at that old Laminex table with you and Posy and eat what you eat. I want to start over from here, from this table. Mavis looked at Posey and nodded. The girl ran to fetch 3 mismatched plates from the cupboard. Julian sat down on the wooden chair, which creaked under his weight. He ran his hand over the table's surface. He felt the wood grain, the knife cuts, the burns from hot pots. This table was the map of his mother's life. A life of resilience. "Posy told me something in the park," Julian said as he listened to the sound of the ladle serving the soup. "She told me, 'I can heal your eyes.'" I didn't believe her at first. Mavis placed the steaming plate in front of him and put a spoon in his hand. "Children see what we no longer see, Julian. Maybe she's right. Sometimes the blindness isn't in the eyes, it's in the heart. And your heart just opened." Julian took the first spoonful of soup. The taste was simple, rustic, but it tasted like glory. It tasted like truth. And as he ate in that miserable shack, surrounded by the only 2 people who loved him for who he was and not for what he had, Julian O'Connell felt richer and more sighted than in his entire previous life. But he knew the battle was just beginning. Outside, the world of Serafina and her lawyers awaited him, and he would have to fight blind and from poverty to reclaim his life and seek justice. "Mum," Julian said, putting down the spoon for a moment. "Tomorrow people will come, lawyers, maybe police. Serafina won't rest." "Let them come," Mavis said, sitting beside him and taking his hand. "We're not scared anymore. You're here. And this old table has withstood earthquakes, son. It will withstand a blonde woman with lawyers." Posy sat on the other side, eating her soup eagerly. "Besides," the girl said, with her mouth full, "you're Uncle Julian, and Uncle Julian looks like he's going to win." Julian smiled, a real smile that reached his dead eyes. "Yes, Posy, we are going to win." Night fell over the settlement with a heaviness Julian had never experienced in his life of Egyptian cotton sheets and smart thermostats. Here, the darkness was not just the absence of light, it was a physical entity that brought with it the cold, a damp chill that filtered through the cracks in the rotten wood and permeated to the bones. Julian lay on a thin foam mattress, pulled onto the floor of the small living room. His mother had insisted on giving him her own bed, but he had adamantly refused, threatening to sleep outside if she didn't agree to rest in her room. Despite the pain in his back and the discomfort of his ruined suit, Julian felt a strange mental peace, though his body was on high alert due to the unfamiliar sounds. The incessant barking of stray dogs, the distant reggae of some neighbor, and occasionally the dry sound of what seemed to be shots in the distance. "Uncle," a small voice whispered in the dark. Julian turned his head toward the sound. He heard the shuffle of bare feet on the uneven cement. "I'm awake, Posy." "What is it?" "I brought you the tiger blanket." He felt the girl cover him with a heavy synthetic scratchy blanket. "It's the warmest one. Nan kept it for when an important visitor came. I think you're the most important visitor we've ever had, even with your ripped trousers." Julian smiled in the gloom, touching the thick fabric. "Thank you, little one. It's perfect." "Uncle." Posy sat on the floor beside him. Her voice hesitated. "Are you scared?" "Scared." Julian thought about his answer. He was afraid of the future, of his blindness, of the looming legal battle, a little. "Why do you ask?" "Because when rich people come here, they're always scared. They lock their car doors, they look at us like we're going to bite them. But you stayed to sleep. I'm not rich people today, Posy. Today I'm just Mavis's son. And I'm not afraid to be here. I'm afraid of what I left down there, of the lie I was living in." There was a comfortable silence. Then, Julian remembered something crucial. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket for his mobile phone, a cutting-edge device Serafina had configured with basic voice commands, but which he barely used because she controlled all his communications. "Posy, I need your help. I need you to be my eyes again." He pulled out the phone. The battery was at 40%. "Enough. What do I have to do?" the girl asked, leaning closer. "I need to unlock this. But Serafina changed the password last week, so I couldn't call anyone by mistake. She used my finger. But now I need you to look for grease on the screen. If you can guess the pattern." "It's very dirty," the girl said, taking the device with reverence. "But wait, the blonde woman has long fingers, right?" "Yes. When I saw her in the park, she drew a says on her phone, a big says for Serafina." Julian felt a pang of hope. His wife's vanity was her greatest weakness. "Try it." Starting top left. Posy slid her small finger across the screen. The phone emitted a cheerful sound and vibrated. "It's open!" she exclaimed in an excited whisper. "There's a photo of her on the screen. She's smiling with a white dog." "Good. Now, Posy, I need you to look in the contacts. Search for Reese Private. No, Reese Lawyer. It has to say private. He's a university friend, the only one Serafina didn't buy because she hates him." The girl, Her tongue sticking out the corner of her lips in concentration, scrolled the contact list. Reese. Here it is. Reese Private. Do I press the green button? Yes. And put it on speaker. The dial tone rang once, twice, 3 times. It was 11 p.m. Julian held his breath. If Reese didn't answer, he was alone. Julian? The voice on the other end sounded sleepy and confused. Is that you? I've been trying to talk to you for 6 months, and that witch of a wife of yours tells me you're not available. Reese, listen to me closely because I don't have much time. Julian spoke with a clarity and authority he hadn't felt since before the accident. I'm alive, I'm sane, and I'm at my mother's house. Your mother? But she passed away. Serafina sent an obituary. It's all a lie. Julian cut in. Reese, Serafina has had me kidnapped in my own home. She's isolated me. She made me believe my family was dead to rob me. I need you to act right now. First thing tomorrow, she's going to try to have me institutionalized. She's going to say I'm crazy, that I have trauma-induced dementia. Whatever. The sound of sheets rustling and a lamp turning on was heard on the other end of the line. I knew something smelt fishy. Julian, if she has a medical power of attorney, she can have you forcibly committed. That's why I'm calling you. You have the copy of my previous will and the general power of attorney we signed 5 years ago before I married her. That document was never legally revoked, was it? No, you never revoked it. It's still valid. Technically, I'm still your principal legal proxy above her in cases of conflict of interest. Good. I want you to freeze everything. Accounts, cards, company access, everything. Block it under suspicion of fraud, and I want you to come and get me tomorrow. But don't come alone. Bring a notary, and if you can, the press. The press, Julian? Are you sure? That's going to destroy the company's image. I don't care about the company, Reese. I care about my life. If Serafina tries to forcibly remove me from here, I want cameras. I want the world to see where the owner of O'Connell Industries' mother lives, while his wife spends millions on jewelry. Understood. Understood. Where are you? Send me the location. Pussy, Julian said. Do you know how to send the location? Yes, uncle. My mum used to do it. The girl tapped the screen a couple of times. Done. It says sent. See you tomorrow, mate. And Reese, thank you. Rest, Julian. Tomorrow is going to be a war. The call ended. Julian let the phone drop onto his chest and released a shaky sigh. He felt Posey's hand squeezing his. Are we going to fight dragons tomorrow? She asked. Yes, little one. We are going to fight tomorrow. But this time, I have the fire. The sunrise on the ridge was not poetic. It was noisy. The sound of roosters mingled with the roar of delivery trucks and the hustle of people leaving for work. Julian woke up with his body aching from the hardness of the floor, but his mind clearer than ever. The smell of freshly brewed coffee, a watery but hot coffee, filled the small room. Morning, son, Mavis said, putting a dented metal cup in his hands. Drink it slowly. It's boiling. It's all there is. The bread ran out last night. Julian sat up, rubbing his useless eyes. Don't worry about breakfast, Mum. You'll have a full pantry soon. I promise. Having you here is enough for me, she replied, sitting beside him and stroking his back. But son, I have a bad feeling. I've seen strange cars lurking at the bottom of the ridge since early this morning. Black cars that really shine. Julian tensed. Serafina hadn't wasted time. Posey, Julian called. Are you there? Yes, uncle. I'm looking out the window. The girl's voice trembled. There are lots of people down there. There are police and men in suits, and the woman in red's car is there. Help me up. I need to stand. I need to be presentable. Julian stood up, shaking the dust off his suit as best he could. He adjusted his tie, even though it was crooked. He ran his hand through his hair to smooth it down. How do I look? You look like a giant, uncle, Posey said, running to his side. Suddenly, a loud bang shook the flimsy metal door. Open up, police! An authoritative voice shouted. Mavis let out a gasp and backed away, clutching her chest. Don't be afraid, Julian ordered, standing in front of them like a human shield facing the door. Open the door, Posey. The trembling girl slid the bolt. The door burst open, hitting the wall. The noise from outside flooded the house. Voices, police radios, murmurs from curious neighbors. Mr. Julian O'Connell, a man with a deep voice, said, I am Officer Mendez. We have a court order to transfer you to a psychiatric clinic. Your wife has filed a complaint of kidnapping and altered mental state. He's not crazy. Mavis shouted, stepping forward, but a policeman shoved her back brusquely. Don't touch my mother, Julian roared. His voice boomed with such force that the officer instinctively took a step back. If you put a hand on her or the girl again, I assure you it will be the last mistake of your careers. Serafina entered the house. The sound of her heels was unmistakable, though they echoed hollowly on the poor cement floor. Oh, Julian. Her voice was a perfect performance of concern and anguish. Look at you. You're dirty, hurt, living among rats. She approached, trying to touch him, but he slapped her hand away. Shh, calm down, darling. The doctor will give you an injection so you can sleep, and when you wake up, you'll be in your own bed, clean and safe. All of this will have been a nightmare. The only nightmare here is you, Serafina, Julian said, turning his head toward her, his dark glasses reflecting his wife's silhouette. Officer, do you have that order signed? Yes, sir. Signed by the judge an hour ago. And do you know that kidnapping a sane person using influence and false testimony is a federal crime punishable by up to 20 years in prison? Julian asked with lethal calm. Serafina let out a nervous laugh. Don't listen to him, he's delirious. Take him away now. He's dangerous. Two burly nurses entered, grabbing Julian by the arms. He resisted, but they were strong. Mavis cried out, clinging to the leg of one of them. Posse bit the hand of another, who threw her away with a shove. No, Julian shouted, hearing the girl fall. Let go of me. At that moment, the sound of a helicopter filled the air, making the corrugated iron roof sheets vibrate almost enough to tear them off. The wind from the blades kicked up a cloud of dust outside. What the hell is that? Officer Mendez asked, looking outside. A sports car braked with a skid right at the entrance, followed by two television news vans. Stop right there, a familiar voice shouted. Reese entered the shack, panting, with a briefcase in his hand, and followed by a cameraman who was already filming. No one is taking Mr. O'Connell. Serafina went pale under her perfect makeup. Reese, you have no business here. Get out. I have more business here than you, Serafina, Reese said, planting himself in front of the police. Officer, I am Mr. O'Connell's personal attorney. I have a notarized affidavit here, digitally signed this morning, revoking any power this woman has over my client, and I have a live feed for the midday news. Do you want to be the officer who drags a blind, sane man from his mother's house in front of the entire country? Officer Mendez looked at the camera. He looked at Serafina, then let go of Julian's arm. This is a civil matter, the policeman said, raising his hands. We just follow orders. But if there's a conflict of powers, we don't get involved until the judge decides. Let's go. You can't leave, Serafina shrieked, losing her mask. I paid you. I'm his wife. The silence that followed her slip was sepulchral. Julian adjusted his jacket with dignity. He took a step toward Serafina. You paid them, Serafina? He asked softly. Who? Or are you referring to the money you took from the emergency account last night? Too bad. Reese blocked it 3 hours ago. Your cards don't work. Your access to the mansion has been revoked, and the car you came in is registered to the company. No, you can't do this to me, she whispered, backing toward the door. I took care of you. I put up with you when you went blind. You buried me alive, Julian corrected, but you forgot one detail. The seed grows in the dark, and I have just blossomed. Julian extended his hand behind him. Posey, come here. The girl, her lips split from the fall, but her eyes shining with triumph, ran to his side and took his hand. Get out of my house, Serafina, Julian said, and get out of my life. I'll see you in court. Serafina looked at the cameras focusing on her, looked at the hostile environment, and knew she had lost. She turned and ran out, stumbling in the mud, fleeing not only her husband, but the truth that had finally caught up with her. Julian felt the tension leave his body. He turned toward where he heard his mother's sobs. It's over, Mum. He opened his arms. The monsters are gone. Reese approached, putting a hand on his friend's shoulder. Good show, Julian. But now comes the hard part. You have to take back your empire. Julian smiled, stroking Posey's head. My empire is here, Reese. At this old Laminex table. What's outside, that's just money. And money is easy to recover. What I recovered today is priceless. However, as the adrenaline subsided, Julian felt a sharp pain in his head. Behind his eyes, a flash of white light crossed his dark vision like lightning on a starless night. He staggered. Uncle? Posey asked. Are you okay, Julian? He blinked. For a fraction of a second, just a fraction, he thought he saw a red spot, the color of Posey's gifted dress. Posey, he whispered, touching his eyes. I think I saw something. The flash of light Julian thought he saw in the darkness of the shack was not an isolated miracle. It was the spark that ignited a bonfire of urgency. Reese, still with the adrenaline from the confrontation with the police running through his veins, didn't waste time. Hearing his friend mention the red spot, he loaded Julian into the sports car with the help of one of the cameramen. As Mavis and Posy climbed into the back, clinging to the leather seats with a mixture of awe and terror, the journey to the San Rafael private clinic, the only one in the city with no ties to the O'Connell Industries board, was silent but charged with tension. Julian had his eyes closed, clenching his fists. He was afraid to hope. For 6 months he had accepted the darkness as his penance for abandoning his family. Believing he could regain his sight felt like an undeserved gift. Upon arrival, the contrast was brutal. Mavis, in her patched dress and worn shoes, walked hunched through the immaculate white marble corridors, afraid of dirtying the floor. Posy, however, looked at everything with wide eyes, fascinated by the ceiling lights that hummed softly. "Reese, are you sure about this?" Julian asked, as he was seated in a wheelchair to be taken to ophthalmic emergencies. "Serafina took me to the best specialists in Europe. They all said the same thing. Irreversible optic nerve atrophy. Serafina took you to the doctors she paid for, Julian." Reese replied in a harsh voice, as he signed the admission documents with barely contained fury. "I've been reviewing your digital insurance files on the way here. There are no records of those consultations in Europe. There are only bills for aesthetic clinics and transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Julian, it's very likely you never saw a real neurologist after the first week of the accident." The revelation fell on Julian like a slab. If that was true, they had not only stolen his money and time, they had stolen his light. They had condemned him to darkness out of pure greed. Dr. Aris, an older man with a calm voice and steady hands, performed the preliminary exams an hour later. The room was silent. Mavis was praying the rosary in a corner, passing the plastic beads between her deformed fingers. Posy held Julian's hand, transmitting that strange electrical calm she seemed to possess. "Mr. O'Connell," the doctor finally said, turning on the room lights. "I have good news and bad news." Julian's heart stopped for an instant. "Tell me the truth, doctor. I've had enough lies for one lifetime." "The bad news is that you have severe edema that has partially calcified due to lack of treatment. The pressure on the optic nerve has been brutal for months. The headache you feel is not stress. It's your brain screaming for space." "And the good news?" Reese asked anxiously. "The good news is that the nerve is not dead. It's asleep. It's suffocated, but alive. That flash you saw was the nerve reacting to a sudden pressure change, perhaps due to adrenaline or physical exertion. If we operate now, tonight, there is a 60% chance you will regain your vision. It won't be perfect at first, but you will see." A sob broke the silence. It wasn't from Julian, but from Mavis. The elderly woman approached the stretcher, ignoring her own shame about her humble appearance, and took her son's face in her hands. "God is great," she cried. "I told you, son. The girl cured your soul, and God will cure your eyes." Julian searched for his mother's hands and kissed them. "No, Mum, you cured me. If I hadn't climbed the ridge, if I hadn't eaten that soup, I never would have known I could fight." "There is a risk," the doctor warned, lowering his tone. "The surgery is complex. If the pressure is released too quickly, there could be a hemorrhage. You could lose your sight forever, or even suffer a stroke. I need your immediate authorization." Julian didn't hesitate for a second. "Operate, doctor. I'd rather die trying to see my mother's face one more time than live 100 years in the dark with that woman." The following hours were a whirlwind. Nurses entering and exiting, IV drips, the smell of antiseptic replacing the smell of gum, leaves and poverty that Julian carried on his clothes. Before he was taken to the operating room, he asked for a moment alone with them. Julian, already in a hospital gown, seemed smaller, more vulnerable, but his features were relaxed. "Mum," he said, extending his hand into the void until he found Mavis's shoulder. "If anything goes wrong, if I don't wake up, I want you to know Reese has instructions. Everything I have is yours and Posy's, the house, the money, everything. Serafina won't see a cent." "Shut your mouth, lad," Mavis scolded him tenderly, tidying his hair. "You're going to wake up, and you're going to be hungry. I'm going to make you a real chicken soup, not that dirty water they give here. Don't talk about inheritances, talk about life." Then Julian turned to the girl. "Posy, I'm here, uncle. You told me in the park, I can heal your eyes. Did you know something the doctors didn't? How did you know?" The girl shrugged, a gesture Julian could feel in the air. "Because eyes don't lie, uncle. Yours were moving, looking for the light. The woman in red had still eyes, like a shark's. Dead things don't look for the light. You were looking." Julian smiled, a tear escaping the corner of his eye. "Promise me you'll look after Nan while I sleep. I promise you. And I promise you that when you wake up, I'll be there to tell you what color things are." The orderlies entered. The farewell was brief. The swinging doors closed, leaving Mavis and Posey alone in a luxurious waiting room, surrounded by magazines they couldn't read well and people who eyed them askance, unaware that these two bogans were the only family of the richest man in the city. The wall clock in the waiting room ticked past 3 a.m. The tick-tock was monotonous, hypnotic, almost torturous. Mavis had fallen asleep in an uncomfortable chair, her head resting on Reese's shoulder, who, despite his $5,000 lawyer's suit, hadn't moved an inch so as not to wake her. Posey was awake, sitting on the floor, drawing with crayons a kind nurse had given her on the back of old forms. She drew a large table where 3 smiling people were eating, and a huge sun with yellow rays that took up almost the entire page. Suddenly, the operating room doors opened. Dr. Aris came out, removing his surgical mask. He looked exhausted. He had deep circles under his eyes and sweat stains on the neck of his green scrubs. Reese woke up with a start, gently rousing Mavis. "Doctor?" Reese asked hoarsely. Mavis stood up, clutching the rosary to her chest so tightly her knuckles turned white. "The operation was complicated," the doctor began, and Mavis's heart skipped a beat. "There was more calcification than we expected. We had to reconstruct some of the surrounding tissue." "But he's okay?" Mavis insisted, anguish cracking her voice. "He's stable. He's in the recovery room. The anesthesia is wearing off." "But," the doctor paused dramatically, looking at the 3 people in front of him. "We won't know if it worked until we remove the bandages. That will be in a few hours, when the initial swelling goes down. But he reacted to the light of the torch while he was sedated. That's a very good sign." Mavis let out the breath she had been holding and crossed herself. "Thank you, Blessed Virgin. Thank you." 6 more hours passed. Dawn filtered through the windows of private room 402. Julian was sitting up in bed, his head wrapped in thick white bandages. He was awake, nervous. His hands gripped the sheets tightly. "Are you there?" he asked for the 10th time in the last 10 minutes. "We're here, son," Mavis replied, taking his right hand. "I'm here, Uncle," Posey said, taking his left. "And I'm here guarding the door so no blonde witch comes in," Reese added from the sofa, trying to lighten the mood, though he too was sweating with nerves. Dr. Aris entered with a nurse. He carried special scissors. "All right, Mr. O'Connell, it's time. I want you to keep your eyes closed while I remove the bandage. When I tell you, open them very slowly. The light is going to hurt. That's normal. It's going to be blurry. That's normal. Don't panic." Julian nodded. He felt his heart beating in his ears like a war drum. The sound of the scissors cutting the gauze seemed deafening. He felt the pressure around his head decrease. The fresh air touched his eyelids for the first time in hours. "Ready," the doctor said. "The blinds are halfway down. Slowly, Julian. Open your eyes." Julian took a deep breath. Fear paralyzed him for a second. What if he opened his eyes and the darkness remained? What if it had all been a cruel illusion? But then he felt the calluses on his mother's hand. He felt the smallness of Posey's hand. They were his reality. If he couldn't see them, at least he could feel them. That gave him courage. He opened his eyelids. The first thing was pain. A stabbing pain, like needles of light piercing his unaccustomed retinas. He slammed his eyes shut and let out a moan. "Easy. It's normal," the doctor said. "Try again. Blink quickly." Julian tried again. He opened his eyes a crack. Light. It wasn't darkness. It was light. A grayish, blurry, formless light, but light nonetheless. Tears began to flow, cleaning his eyes, and with them, shapes began to define themselves. He saw patches of color, a white patch, the doctor, a dark patch, Reese, and beside him, 2 patches, one gray and one red. The gray hoodie, the red dress Posey had been given at the hospital because her clothes were too dirty. Julian blinked furiously, focusing. The image slowly cleared, like an old camera adjusting its lens. He saw a face lined with deep wrinkles, with white, messy hair, and watery eyes that looked at him with infinite love. It wasn't the young woman he remembered from 30 years ago. It was a tired old woman, but it was the most beautiful face he had ever seen. "Mum," Julian whispered. His voice was barely a thread. Are you old?" Mavis let out a watery laugh through her tears, a laugh that sounded like celestial music. "And you're skinny and you look shocked, my boy." Julian turned his head slightly, lowering his gaze. There was the girl from the park. Her face was washed, but she still had that wild and dignified air. Her large black eyes looked at him with anticipation. Julian saw the small scar on her chin. He saw the freckle on her nose. He saw his sister Sophie in the features of that child. "Posy," Julian said, reaching out his trembling hand to touch her face. He no longer needed to fumble. He went straight to her cheek. "Are you? You look just like her." "Can you see me, Uncle?" the girl asked, searching. "Do you really see me?" "I see you," Julian confirmed, and he broke down in tears. A cry of absolute liberation. "I see you. I see your eyes. I see your nose. I see everything. It worked," Reese shouted, punching the air in pure euphoria. The doctor smiled with satisfaction and discreetly withdrew to give them space. Julian looked at his own hands, looked at the sheets, looked at the room. Everything was wonderful. The beige color of the wall seemed fascinating to him. The dust floating in a ray of sunshine seemed like art. "Forgive me," Julian said, looking his mother and niece in the eyes, connecting visually for the first time. "Forgive me for not having seen this before. I was blind long before the accident. I didn't see what was worthwhile." Mavis leaned over and kissed his forehead, right where Posy had put her hand in the park. "God writes straight with crooked lines, son. You had to lose your sight to learn how to look. But now you have work to do." Julian nodded. His expression hardened slightly, changing from vulnerability to determination. He looked at Reese. "Reese, hand me a mirror." "A mirror?" Reese hesitated, but took out his phone and put on the front-facing camera. Julian looked at himself on the screen. He saw the dark circles, the 2-day growth of beard, the bandages, but he also saw something new in his eyes. There was no longer that milky, dead fog. His pupils were contracted, alive, focused. They were the eyes of a man who had returned from hell. "Put that phone away, Reese," Julian said, giving it back. "And get ready, because as soon as I get out of here, we're going to the mansion. I have a few things to see about my wife, and this time she won't be able to hide." Posy carefully climbed onto the bed and snuggled up next to him. "Uncle, now that you can see, can we go see the ocean? Nan says the ocean is big, like the sky, but on the ground. I've never been." Julian hugged the girl with one arm and his mother with the other, closing his eyes for a moment, not out of blindness, but out of gratitude. "We'll go to the ocean, Posy. We'll go wherever you want. But first, we're going to get our life back." The hospital room, cold and sterile, felt warmer at that moment than any home Julian had ever known. The true healing was over, but justice had just begun. The O'Connell mansion stood imposing on the city's most exclusive hill, a monument of marble and glass that shone under the afternoon sun. Inside, however, the air was tainted by panic. Serafina was running back and forth in the main study, a room that used to be Julian's sanctuary and which she had turned into her operations center. Several valuable paintings had been unhooked from the walls, leaving rectangles of lighter paint like scars on the silk wallpaper. On the mahogany desk, 3 open suitcases vomited. Designer clothes, jewelry cases, and wads of cash. Serafina, her hair messy and her makeup smudged with nervous sweat, emptied the safe hidden behind a false panel in the library. Her hands trembled as she stuffed documents and bearer bonds into a leather bag. Damn it," she muttered through clenched teeth, casting a paranoid glance at the closed door. "That idiot lawyer froze the bank accounts, but he doesn't know about the Panama account or Julian's grandmother's diamonds. I have to get out of here before the judge issues the eviction order." The phone in her pocket vibrated. She ignored it. She knew who was calling the partners who had abandoned her as soon as they saw the news. The high society friends who now pretended not to know her. She was alone, but it didn't matter, she thought as she slammed the safe shut. With what she had in the suitcases, she could start over in Europe, far from that useless blind man and his rat family. "I just need to get to the airport," she murmured, zipping up the last suitcase. She smoothed her skirt. She took a deep breath to regain her mask of coldness and dragged the suitcases toward the door. She opened the double wooden leaf with an abrupt movement, ready to yell at the staff to load her luggage, but she stopped dead. The suitcases fell from her hands with a dull thud. In the center of the grand foyer, standing on the geometric mosaic floor, was Julian. He was wearing clean clothes, an impeccable gray suit that Reese had gotten him. And although he still wore dark glasses, his posture was not that of the defeated man she had manipulated for months. He stood tall, motionless, like a statue of vengeance. Behind him, flanking him like guardians, were Reese, 2 high-ranking police officers, and, to Serafina's horror, old Mavis and the dirty girl, Posy. But they no longer looked dirty. Mavis wore a simple but clean dress, and the girl's hair was neatly combed, and she held Julian's hand with pride. "Going somewhere, Serafina?" Julian asked. His voice resonated in the perfect acoustics of the foyer. calm and lethal. Serafina regained her breath. Her calculating brain began to work at full speed. He was still wearing dark glasses. He still couldn't see. She could manipulate him one last time. "Julian, my love!" she exclaimed, instantly changing her tone to one of hysterical relief. She walked toward him, dodging the suitcases. "Thank God you're here. Those horrible men told me you were in the hospital. I was packing our things to leave. We have to flee, darling. Reese is tricking you. He wants to take over the company, and those people you brought are accomplices." Serafina got closer, extending her hands to touch her husband's face, using the same tactic of caresses she had used to emotionally sedate him so many times. "Let's go, Julian. I have a plane waiting. I'll take you to Switzerland, to see a real doctor. Just you and me, far from all these people who want to harm you." Julian didn't move. He let her approach. He let her hands, perfumed with that expensive fragrance that now disgusted him, touch his cheeks. "To Switzerland?" Julian asked softly. "To the same imaginary doctor who diagnosed my irreversible atrophy?" Serafina froze. Her fingers stopped on his skin. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, a note of fear filtering into her voice. "I just want to take care of you. Without me, you're lost in the dark. Julian, you need me. I am your eyes. You were never my eyes, Serafina. You were my blindfold." With a slow, deliberate movement, Julian raised his hands and took off his dark glasses. Serafina let out a gasp and stumbled back. Julian's eyes, though still red from the recent surgery, were open and fixed on her. They looked at her with devastating clarity. They stared at her, following her every movement. There was no emptiness in that gaze. There was judgment. "Julian," she stammered, pale as a ghost. "You. The red dress is garish on you, Serafina," Julian said, sweeping his gaze over her from top to bottom. "I always thought it was elegant. Now I see it's vulgar. Like you." The revelation hit her with the force of a train. He could see. The game was over. The control was over. The lies about burned letters and dead mothers were over. Serafina looked toward the suitcases full of money and jewels. Her survival instinct fired. She no longer tried to feign love. She lunged toward the luggage, desperate. "It's mine," she screamed, grabbing the handle of a suitcase. "I have rights. I'm your wife. I have a right to half of everything." "You have a right to nothing," Reese intervened, stepping forward with a blue folder in his hand. "We've reviewed the accounts, Serafina. Embezzlement, forgery, medical insurance fraud, and worst of all, abandonment of a disabled person." "Officers," Julian ordered, without taking his eyes off the woman who had sworn to love him. "Take her away, and make sure those suitcases stay here. What's inside belongs to the foundation I'm opening in my sister Sophie's name." The police advanced. Serafina tried to resist, scratching and shouting insults that echoed off the marble walls. "Damn you, Julian!" she shrieked as they put on the handcuffs. "You were a pathetic invalid. I made you a man. You should be grateful to me." "Without you," Julian interrupted, raising his voice above her screams. "Without you, I am free." As the officers dragged her toward the door, Serafina crossed glances with Mavis. The elderly woman, who had remained silent, took a step forward. There was no hatred on her face, only infinite pity. "May God forgive you, dear," Mavis said softly, "because you're going to have a lot of time alone to think about what you did." Serafina spat on the floor at the elderly woman's feet before being pushed into the patrol car, which waited outside with its flashing lights, staining the front garden blue and red. Silence returned to the foyer, a clean silence. Julian let out a long sigh, as if he had been holding his breath for years. He turned toward his mother and his niece. For the first time, he saw his own house through his healed eyes. He saw the cold opulence, the uncomfortable furniture, the pretentious art. "It's so big," Posey said, looking at the vaulted ceiling with her mouth open. "And it echoes. You lived here all alone, Uncle." "Yes, little one. I lived here alone," Julian replied, kneeling to her height. He stroked her cheek tenderly, marveling again at the miracle of being able to see the color of her skin, the sparkle in her eyes. "But that's over. This house is too cold." "What are we going to do?" Mavis asked, looking around timidly. Julian stood up and looked at Reese. "Reese, put the house up for sale tomorrow morning. Sell the furniture, the paintings, the cars, sell everything. I don't want any of this." "And where will you go?" the surprised lawyer asked. Julian looked through the large windows toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in oranges and violets, colors he drank in with thirsty gratitude. "Posey wants to see the ocean," Julian said, smiling. And Mum deserves a garden where she can plant her flowers without asking anyone's permission. We're gonna find a home, Reese. Not a mansion, a home. But first, Julian walked toward the kitchen, followed by everyone's confused gaze, and returned a few minutes later with something in his hands. It wasn't a jewel or a document. It was a piece of stale bread and some cheese he had found in the staff pantry. He sat down on the marble floor of the foyer, crossed his legs, and patted the floor beside him. "I'm hungry," he said, looking at his mother and niece. "And this is the only table that matters now, the one we make ourselves." Mavis smiled, her eyes full of tears, and sat down next to him on the floor. Posy launched herself between the two. Reese, loosening his silk tie, shrugged and sat down too, forming a circle. There, on the floor of a multi-million-dollar mansion empty of love but full of hope, the O'Connell family shared their first meal in freedom. 1 year later, the sound of waves gently breaking on the shore was the constant soundtrack of the White House. It wasn't a mansion, but it was spacious, with large open windows that let in the salty Pacific breeze and the golden afternoon light. The back garden had no imported marble statues or obsessively geometric hedges. Instead, there was a colorful chaos of bougainvillea, rose bushes, and fruit trees that grew with wild vitality under Mavis's loving care. Julian sat on the terrace with a book in his hands. It wasn't an audiobook, it was a paper book with printed black letters that his eyes greedily scanned. Sometimes he stopped just to enjoy the fact that he could see the shape of the letters, the texture of the paper, the contrast of the ink. He wore glasses, yes, but they were reading glasses, with a light prescription. His eyes had a lively sparkle, surrounded by lines of expression that were now lines of laughter, not bitterness. "Uncle Julian, look at me!" The shout came from the beach about 50 meters from the house. Julian looked up. He didn't need to squint. He saw the girl running across the wet sand with perfect clarity. Posy had grown. She no longer wore gray rags. She wore a bright yellow swimsuit and was running after a golden Labrador dog that jumped among the sea foam. She looked healthy, strong, happy. "I see you, Posy!" he shouted back, waving his hand. "Careful of the current." "It's all right. I know how to swim now," she replied, diving into a small wave. Julian smiled and closed the book. The satisfaction he felt in his chest was warm and solid. Over the last year, he had rebuilt O'Connell Industries, purging the corruption Serafina had sown and redirecting the company towards social impact projects. But his greatest success wasn't in the financial statements. It was right there on that beach. "Julian, son, come and help me with this," Mavis called from inside the house. Julian stood up and entered. The kitchen was the heart of the home. It smelled of coriander, lemon, and fried fish. Mavis was standing in front of the stove, humming an old song. She looked rejuvenated. The bone aches had lessened with the warm weather and good nutrition. And although her hands were still deformed by a lifetime of work, now they only handled fresh ingredients and flowers. "What do you need, Mum? Take the table out to the garden." Reese just arrived with his wife, and they brought the cake. "Posy insists we eat outside under the mango tree." "Which table?" "The new teak one." Mavis turned with a raised eyebrow and a mischievous smile. "No, son. The table, our table." Julian let out a laugh. Of course, in a corner of the modern kitchen, gloriously clashing with the stainless steel appliances, was the old Millionaire'S table. They had brought it from the shack on the ridge. It had cost more to transport it than to buy a new one. But Julian had insisted. A carpenter had sanded and varnished it so it wouldn't splinter, but he had left all the scars, the knife marks, and the burns. It was their anchor. Julian lifted the table. It was heavy, but the weight felt good. He took it out to the garden and placed it under the generous shade of the mango tree, right where they could see the ocean. Reese appeared from the driveway carrying a bakery box, followed by his wife. Julian greeted the lawyer with a strong hug. "You look excellent, Mate. What does the eye doctor say?" 20 inches the right eye and almost perfect in the left," Julian replied, helping to put the tablecloth on. "He calls it a medical miracle. I call it Mum's soup." Posy came running from the beach, soaked and covered in sand, followed by the dog, which shook itself, splashing everyone. There were shouts and laughter. "Go wash up, young lady," Mavis ordered, coming out with a large clay pot. "No one sits at my table with sand." Minutes later, everyone was seated around the old Millionaire'S table. The sun was beginning to sink into the ocean, tinting the world a royal gold. There was simple but delicious food, fresh seafood, rice, fried fish, and plantains. Julian looked around. He saw the vibrant colors of the flowers. He saw the deep blue of the ocean. He saw his niece's flushed face. He saw the peace in his mother's eyes, and he saw the loyalty in his friend's face. "I want to propose a toast," Julian said, raising his wine glass. Everyone fell silent and raised their glasses. Pazzi raised hers, full of orange juice. "A year ago," Julian began, his voice trembling slightly with emotion, "I was sitting on a park bench believing my life was over. I was surrounded by darkness not just in my eyes, but in my soul. I thought money was everything and that I had lost everything." He looked at Pazzi. Then, a little girl put her hand on my forehead and said a crazy thing. "I can heal your eyes." I didn't believe her. But she wasn't talking about corneas or optic nerves. She was talking about seeing the truth. He looked at Mavis. "Thanks to you, I learned that true blindness is indifference. True blindness is forgetting where you come from and who you love. Today I can see the sunset, and it is beautiful, but nothing, absolutely nothing that my eyes can see now is as beautiful as what I felt when you hugged me in that dark shack when I had nothing." Julian took his mother's hand and his niece's hand over the rough surface of the old table. "To sight," Julian concluded, "to the sight that sees with the heart, and to this table, may we never lack it, wherever we are. Cheers." Everyone shouted in unison. Glasses clinked, laughter filled the air, mingling with the sound of the ocean. As the sun finished setting, giving way to a twilight full of stars, Julian stayed watching Pazzi, who was explaining to Reese with exaggerated gestures how she had caught a giant wave. Julian took off his reading glasses and left them on the table. He no longer needed filters. He looked up at the sky, where the first star of the night began to shine, and whispered to himself, and perhaps to the sister who watched him from above, "I see everything, Sophie. Now I really see everything." The camera slowly pulls away, showing the happy group gathered around the humble wooden table in the middle of paradise, until the image fades into the light of the stars and the screen goes to black. The end.